We are live. Welcome to our December webinar. Can't believe it is December. It's actually kind of
I
exciting.
know.
What do you think,
Yep.
Brian?
Oh yeah. This year is it was gone in a flash, which is all the more reason to be thinking about next year, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, every year seems to just go by dizzyingly fast. But then we get to this time of year and get to take a little breather and reset and plan for an incredible next year.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
All
excited
right.
for it.
So we have a pretty good group that are streaming in here. So as we like to do, as we often start these webinars, tell us where you're joining from. Put it in the chat and make sure everyone is selected um, instead of just the hosts and panelists. It's always fun to see the diversity of where people are across the country, nation, and even countries. And someone has their AI tool in here. Okay,
Nice.
no
Awesome.
problem. Snowy Syracuse, New York, Hawthorne, California, Kansas City, Missouri. Good luck from Woodstock. Hey there, Kyra. Iowa, St. Louis, Gear, Keokuk. Very good. Awesome. Very good. And I do see my dad in here as well, as he often joins these webinars disguised as Ben Dover. Um, it's good to see you in here, Dad. It's always good to have family support in your business. All right. Today, we are talking about 4 strategic pillars for manufacturing success in 2026 and beyond. These are things we've talked about in the past, but this will be a nice sort of concise wrap up for this coming year. Reminders for those that are already, using ProShop and some hopefully some just really solid points for those that aren't, and some ideas about how you can implement those things. So these are going to be the pillars. We'll get to those more in a second, including plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Per the housekeeping, please use the Q&A feature if you have a question rather than the chat tool. It's a little easier to keep on top of it. And then of course we are recording this as you record all webinars, and we will definitely send a link out to you to share it with others or review it as you need to. And I am joined by my good friend and longtime coworker, Brian. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
Hey, Paul. It's good. It's good. Yeah,
Excellent.
it's good to see everyone and well, digitally of course, and be able to share all of our thoughts like this. I love this platform.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into these pillars. There's 4 of them. The first one is sales and quoting at the front end of the business, making sure that is just strong and robust. That flows right into operations and efficiency, making sure that strong sales pressure you're building, you can execute it as efficiently as possible. Of course, you need people to do that work. I know we have some all-stars here on the call that have incredible culture and talent systems. Maybe we'll even ask them to chime in with their thoughts here and there. So that's got to be strong. And then, of course, we believe that a data and technology foundation is pretty fundamental to operating a good, strong business. And maybe we're calling that the integrated shop OS. So let's dig into that. Um, and one theme here as well is like I know it's often feels like there's so many things going on. You're just going a million miles an hour. You don't have time for the important things, but I implore with you, prioritize the planning, prioritize the systems, prioritize getting better in the future, setting the foundation, because you'll never actually find the perfect time to do it. Time is of the essence. All right, let's talk about sales and strategic quoting. This is one of the biggest levers that I think any company can make. And unfortunately, we see far too few companies that are really, truly like a sales and marketing driven organization, sort of at their core. But in my mind, if you can build what I call positive sales pressure, which in my definition means you have more opportunities coming at you with RFQs and opportunities for projects and programs and customers, then you actually have capacity to process with your current size and capabilities. And that allows a couple of things. That allows you to be more selective with what you're quoting, to be really focused on the types of work that is most profitable to you, the most enjoyable, the best work for your company that your employees, enjoy the most, your equipment and all that. and it gives you the opportunity to grow when you want to grow, right? If you decide we need to add a second shift or buy another machine or go get a certification, then you have that positive sales pressure to be able to fill that additional capacity that you create with those decisions. So, Brian, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think that's really any different from any other aspect of the business. You know, if you measure it, you can affect it. So
Hmm.
if you can measure your sales, know what you're good at, know what your machines and employees are good at, then that's going to give you, more inclined to be quoting the right stuff and be able to get after it, so to speak, right? So
Yeah.
just like every other thing that you do in your business, measuring sales, measuring the quality of the output that you get, comparing it to what you thought you were going to do versus what you actually did, really good and important stuff because that's going to help the thing you do tomorrow, right? The thing you quote tomorrow.
Yeah, great point. There's this traditional sales funnel. We don't have a slide for it per se, but right where you're generating interest and awareness at the very top, where someone even learns that your business exists, and then generating interest in that by doing education, by sharing customer wins, making it quite often about them and how you can serve them rather than why your shop is so great. And then once they start engaging with you, right, you can then measure and track, are they sending you RFQs? How often are you winning them? And if you actually take those measurements and put percentages of conversion at each stage, it's easy to then start to kind of tease out where you need to focus your efforts so you're to get your goal of, profitable quoted awarded jobs at the bottom. So a few ways to do that. Obviously, networking is a big one, right? This was taken at an event that we held, or maybe this was at an NTMA event. Anyway, the point is when you get out there, when you connect, in person with other people at, your at local events or national or regional events, those are just such a great way to meet people, just talk, create a human relationship, and those are often what turn into the best business relationships.
Yeah, and oftentimes you'll even find that if you're doing that networking with your competitors, it actually ends up being good for everyone, right? So we've seen this
Totally.
over and over and over again, that even competitive shops will have a tendency to kind of get together, and talk shop, so to speak, and that's really good for the individual shops. It's really good for the industry, and just really makes, elevates sort of the level of what we do in this industry, and how you can perform as an individual company, because you kind of get to know what's going on. And people talk, and it's quote unquote a small industry, and I think that those types of things tend to make a big difference, overall.
100%, Brian. And we have someone in the audience, Kyra Tillman, who exemplifies doing this. She was on Machine Shop Mastery many months earlier this year and just shared how much of a culture shift she implemented when she took over the business from her father, who just would not let any other shop possibly through the door. And she has really kind of flipped that on its head and has peer groups and tours with other shops and just getting out in the industry, and it's worked wonders for her. Maybe if Sarah's on it, she can find that episode and drop it in the chat. Um, so anyway, yes, that's a great call out. Exhibiting at trade shows is also a good one, right? There are often engineers and buyers walking those shows looking for suppliers. Given even though it's a very competitive industry, it's surprising how many OEMs and primes and bigger companies that buy machine parts say they still can't find the right kind of vendors. So if you get to a trade show, if you exhibit, folk build your branding and your messaging around your niche, your specialty. That is a great way to stand out from the crowd and let those prospective buyers know what you are really excellent at and how you can support them in that part of their business. I've talked to so many people that say their social media has been a major driver of their growth. Thank you, Sarah. Has social media has been a major driver of their growth. So, sharing their projects, sharing customer wins, sharing about their company on LinkedIn and other platforms, and then actually reaching out to companies they want to strategically win, has driven, the majority of the revenue that they have today. So you should definitely consider that if you're not doing it. And then with your current customers, the easiest customer to grow is the one you already have. Uh, so definitely, there's this idea that if you don't if they're not having to call you all the time, that's probably a good thing, and it is. If you're not late, if you don't have quality problems, but at the same time, it's easy to kind of slip out of mind. So I would definitely recommend getting out and visiting your major customers at least quarterly in person, even if that means getting on a plane. So that is such an important way to build those relationships. Ask them where their pain points are. Ask them if you can, build the next level assemblies that you're making components for today. There's just so much sort of low-hanging fruit there. And then for those new customers that you're quoting, quote quickly, turn those quotes around, follow up proactively, ask for feedback, and I guarantee you're going to win a higher percentage of those quotes. All right. Other thoughts on that, Brian?
No, I think you're right on. A little bit later, I'll come back to the social media aspect of it when we kind of talk about your staff and your facility, because there's a few notes there. But
Yeah. All right. So when it turns into actually quoting work and winning it, it is so important to really be strategic in how you're quoting, the margins you're quoting, making sure that you are, making profit on that work, right? This is an example of what we call our profit breakout or cost breakdown page, where you can see exactly the margin you made on a job and how it compares to what you quoted you were going to make on a job. So it is a really important part of that feedback loop to make sure that you are, getting rid of those loser jobs and focusing on the profitable ones. And then once you understand what you're good at, the types of parts, the geometries, the tolerances, the materials, then you build that into your marketing and your niche of what you're great at and go target customers that have parts like that. And that's a way to build a very positive sort of flywheel and a positive sort of upward spiral of profitability and nichiness and all those kinds of things. So you can't do that good quoting unless you really have good job costing.
right, right.
All right. And I think going a little further yet, once you have, good profitability data, you should combine that with a bunch of other attributes about your customer and score them in a sort of, global kind of customer scoring matrix. This is an example of the customer scorecard that we created back in the Pro CNC days. We've highlighted the customer here, although Brian and I both knew who it is. But where in the supply chain they exist, right here in the tier 1 and 2 and 3 level, the revenue. So this customer gave us about $1.25 million worth of revenue per year. What industries they served, and then all these metrics of just sort of subjective ratings that we or objective. And then the Venn diagram of price, quality, delivery, right? The old adage is you can only choose two, but really understanding where they focused on. And this particular customer, was less sensitive on price and cared more about quality and delivery. So I think this is a great place for them to be. And then some notes and comments. But if you do this and really start to then look across your entire customer base on what makes a great customer, it just makes it that much easier to go focus and get more of them. And if you want to
Yeah.
pull out your cell phone and grab a picture of that QR code, that will take you to a template that is real similar to this one that you can, tweak and make your own. And Sarah might be able to drop this link as well straight into the chat. So
Yeah, and this is a great example of another area where it's like if you measure it, you can affect it, right? So, being able to reflect on these things and going in and understanding the variable aspects of what you care about, what are your key indicators, whether it's what you're doing internally or like in this case, what you're getting from a client, that can really pay dividends. And of course, at any point when you think about documenting this kind of data and evaluating it, think about using your systems to automate those kinds of reports because the last thing you want to do is be super busy at the end of a quarter and then remind remind yourself that you have to now go compile a bunch of data. So as you're doing your work, if there's a way that you can automate those processes, automate those reports, very similar to how we do inside of ProShop, then that can make this process much, much easier and repeatable over and over and over again. So it makes it less onerous, but still just as important and as impactful as anything else.
Yeah, great point. And I've shared in the link there in the chat a link to a blog post that we wrote a while back about driving profitability using scorecards. And then I think we'll just throw this in here as well. So, and then here's a link to the Google Doc where that template, we've kind of recreated this original template for you to take and use and copy and use it as you like. So hopefully that's useful. All right, we're on to pillar number 2, operational excellence and efficiency. Obviously, we sell in the machining industry, we sell time pretty much, right? If your spindles are turning, if you're making chips efficiently, that is how we build revenue in the business. So there are lots of barriers to making chips more often. And when you can remove those barriers, when you can more directly work on value-added things more often and spend less time on non-value added things, we will often see our clients reporting they getting about 25% more throughput, actual revenue throughput with the same machines and people, right? It varies depending on the customer. Some see less, some see quite a bit more, depending on where their baseline is. But it is remarkable how much more revenue you can generate if you just remove some of those obstacles. Again, with the same machines and people that you have today. So here's an example of a few different types of efficiency leaks, right? I'm sure any of you running on paper or used to run on paper know this one, and I'd love to hear in the chat any anecdotes or any just sentiments that this brings up. When you have a paper-based system and you get an order from a customer, it has to be printed, it has to be compiled with a bunch of other things, and then it literally moves around to many different desks. And usually the people that it's waiting to move to don't even know the order exists, right? So they can't proactively be doing things. They can't be thinking about it or being strategic. And so you lose a lot of time. That lead time at the beginning that you're not making parts or doing something value added, that just crunches the amount of time you actually have to make the parts at the end. And so not only does that add stress to the system, but it also increases the risk that you're not going to be on time. And as we know, if you're dealing with customers where on-time delivery is super critical, they are less price sensitive. So that's another way to just make sure you have this positive spiral of getting alignment with the customers that are the best fit for you, that aren't going to be pinching pennies all day long.
Yeah,
So,
and in this process, this little infographic here is, I think, pretty telling, because every single thing that is inefficient affects the end result, affects the end profit that you get. So if you aren't communicating between departments, that ends up being extra time, and so the job takes longer. If your equipment isn't maintained properly, then of course, same thing. You don't have it when you need it, and then you have to spend money to expedite, to fix it, and so on and so on. And every little thing adds up, whether you know it or not. So if you've accepted the job, it's going to go through your system, and any efficiency leaks you have in your system are going to affect the outcome of that profit. And this is where a lot of these things, obviously these are just some examples, but a lot of these things tend to add up, even though they may seem small, even though your long setup time, hey, it was only an extra half an hour. If it's an extra half an hour on all of your jobs because you don't have standard fixturing, guess what? That's half an hour on every job you do, every day, every week, every month, every year, and it all adds up.
great points, Brian. And those leaks turn into this dollar figure at the bottom, which is your profit, just being much smaller than you should have or probably might expect to have. So let's tackle some of these one-on-one. So some examples of efficiency leaks. We obviously mentioned already. So not being proactive in your procurement processes, which means that you're going to end up paying expedite fees, overtime, all the things that sort of that pile up at the end. Setup's taking too long. We'll get into why this happens. Bottlenecks in QA. This is a big one that a lot of companies just seem to live with, but can be changed significantly with just a little bit more forethought. Having to have to do rework or repackaging or things where you did some kind of work that wasn't actually what the right thing was, and you have to redo it. That's just massive amounts of waste. And then poor visibility, right? Whether that's means you have to work extra hard for having your team meetings, your status meetings, your production meetings, or whatever, or even just getting answers to a customer. Um, and this QR code right here is also something that we created some time ago about lean setup processes. This is not a ProShop specific thing. This is just general best practices on how to reduce setup times. And again, speaking to the metrics, we often hear customers telling us that by implementing those best practices, they see setup time reductions of like 50%. So it can be really dramatic. And we just threw this in here this morning, this little thing from Top Shops, and we're going to talk about it more on this next slide here. But what uh, what the Top Shops survey has indicated, and just this year as they had the conference, when was that? We were there. It was in November. Um, they had this common theme that proactive and intentional purchasing and systems planning is one of the biggest differentiators of top shops and not as higher performing shops. And that those investments in software and hardware led to higher revenue per machine and per employee, and also increased marketability towards new clients. So I loved when I saw that this morning come out, that these are themes that we have been talking about for years now, right? The importance of being a little bit more intentional up at the front instead of just throwing jobs, over the wall to manufacturing and saying good luck with it, right? There are so many critical details that you can do up front that will just make sure that goes much more smoothly. And, the evidence plays out that it leads to higher performance overall. So what we see here is a picture of what we call our pre-processing checklist, where we are defining really just the bare essential things that are important to do up front, again, to set the stage for more success down the line on the shop floor and beyond. So when you do have a non-paper-based system, you can parallel process things. So as soon as that order gets created, multiple people can instantly be alerted and they can start doing their part of things right away, right? So people in procurement can start looking at what they need to do. People in planning can do their thing. The programmers can make sure they're already looking at it. I remember some stories of a customer who used to have many days of lead time at the beginning of their process before their programmers would even know there was a job to work on. And then told me the story where they received an order, and like within a couple hours, he already was getting questions from the programmer proactively. Hey, what about this? What about that? And it just made him realize that everything had shifted so much for them that the programmers were immediately grabbing those new jobs, looking at the models, thinking about their fixturing, and that is going to lead to massive, improvements in their execution down the line. So
You
it's just
forgot
such an
something.
important point. What's that?
Scheduling, right?
Scheduling.
Like you can also
Of
know right
course.
away what your schedule is going to look like, and then everyone can
Absolutely.
build to that, right? So instead of buying material and having it here just as soon as it can be here, they know strategically in procurement, okay, I need to get this material and I need it 3 weeks from today, rather than just on the next truck that shows up on Monday. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Again, all right from the very beginning because everybody can see it's more of an open type system where the key players have their information in front of them instead of having to go and find it or wait for it to be handed to them.
Well said, Brian. And Brian was the scheduler at ProCNC, so he knows all about this part of the business. And yes, not only, and of course, knowing your schedule is an important part of even giving an order confirmation to a customer. But the point about material and tooling is critical. Like, this is a cash intensive business, and cash is king. And there are so many ways to improve your cash position just by being more strategic about when you have things arrive and when you then need to pay those bills, right? We've heard so many anecdotes of customers that used to just buy big lots of material for a large purchase order. have it all come sit on the floor for months on end, and pay that bill up front versus strategically saying, all right, I need 5 bars on this date, 4 bars on this date, 7 on this date, and making sure that you kick that order off to your vendor and then just leave it in their court to deliver exactly when you need those materials.
Yeah.
And that just frees up so much cash flow, which helps with everything else. Awesome point. All right. I know everyone on this call can feel it in their bones when you talk about long setup times, right? It is a perpetually big problem in most shops. They just off, even though, you do your best job quoting and estimating, and then something just goes off the rails and it takes 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times longer than you expected, right? It truly can be like an order of magnitude more. But there again, there are lots of things that you can do to really kind of dial in your process to make sure that doesn't happen. Right, kitting jobs, preparing tools, in their holders and touched off, making sure you have all the work instructions available, legible, can't get lost. You have the correct revision of the drawing. The fixtures are right on hand. You have any special inspection gauges you need. Um, your forms are there for your inspections, and it's all just fully prepped, ready to go. Right, as we grew ProCNC and started leaning into this idea of job kitting, it was just a massive unlock for us. Brian, you were there on the floor. Maybe you can just share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so this is one of those things that can seem daunting if you're not kitting jobs beforehand. That maybe you're a small company, you don't have a lot of extra staff, a lot of extra time. It can seem really, really daunting. And my advice is to start small. Think about what excess time somebody may have. So let's say for a moment you don't have a tooling crib person that can kit jobs. Well, that's okay. It's very likely in the process of running an existing job on a machine, for example. So you've got a machinist there, they've got a 20-minute cycle. It's very likely they may have an extra 4 or 5 minutes every cycle that they could be looking ahead at the next job. And they could see with the programming that's been done what tool lists are going to be needed, what fixtures are going to be needed. They could see maybe get into some inspection and say, well, do I already have the inspection tools in front of me? Do I need to request anything special? And even down to the point of, do I have the right packaging materials for this job? Does this customer really concern themselves with the finish of the parts, or can they be bulk packaged? And you can take these things, and again, just take little bits at a time and start putting that together for the next project that's going. And so maybe it's going to be preparing some tools. Okay, great. That's one less thing you have to do while the machine is not running in the next setup. And over time, you can build a process that addresses that. And we got to the point where in our shop, jobs were ready far more than 24 hours in advance. We did invest in things like additional tool holders and additional fixturing, vices and other kinds of fixtures, so we could do that. And the ROI on those kinds of investments does pay off, but you don't have to start there. You can start much smaller and get that done. And then what you'll find is the machinist, as they can walk up to, like we see in this picture, a kitted job, they can pull that kit over, they can walk up to the empty machine and start in. And they don't have to walk around the shop as much looking for that one tool that they need. They don't have to walk around the shop looking for fixtures. The program can be pre-queued and ready to go, so they don't have to walk over to the programming office, bug them. And we all know, I mean, I'm a machinist by trade, so I get this. The more that you walk around, the more you kind of say hi to your buds, right? And go grab a quick snack from the break room or whatever. And that's not to say that those things aren't cool, but at the same time, they do tend to take up time that we could be focusing on other areas and getting things set up and ready for the shop floor. So again, the key thing here is understanding what's there from the office and from programming, picking some things to focus on. Maybe it's going to be tooling, maybe it's going to be inspection gauges or packaging, and having those preset. And everything you do while the machine is already running means that's less time that the machine doesn't have to run waiting for it to be done later on.
Such good points, Brian. People can tell that you have lived this yourself. So I'll just put my sales hat on for just a second here. This is one of the things that differentiates ProShop from every other product out there. There are specific tools and features and modules and functions to make sure that your cutting tools are ready, your inspection gauges are there and calibrated, your fixtures are ready on a shelf in a position that are so easy to go and grab, right? The work instructions are fully digital. Your first article forms are ready there to be filled out, auto-generated through balloon drawings. So this is just a big differentiator, and it really does move the needle to have a system that's fully integrated end to end, as opposed to having to tack on little systems or make your own little database or your spreadsheets or whatever. And it can really make a big difference. So great point about starting small, Brian. That makes it much more approachable. All right, bottlenecks in QA. We mentioned this earlier. When the parts show up to your QA lab for CMM inspections or just a double check or whatever, that is not the time to be starting to program those or to look at the drawing and starting to balloon it or look at the requirements at all. It is so critical to do this work up front. And again, a system that supports that and propagates that as a best practice and has built-in workflows for making sure that can happen and the visibility and accountability is there is such an important lever to just, again, get rid of those bottlenecks and make sure jobs are just throwing faster through the shop.
And when your employees come into work, they're probably also going to have a much easier time knowing what's expected of them on any given day because you can use
Yeah.
all of this and itemize what are my priorities. And this is key to people that don't work off of like Gantt chart style schedules. So obviously for machines, Gantt charts are great because they show us when something starts and when something stops. But sometimes if we're working, as your example here, CMM programming, we don't necessarily have a Gantt chart schedule for that. Not that you couldn't, but they're not necessarily the most effective tool. But there are other things that you can do that can quantify these things and list them out. And then when I come into work, if I'm working in the QA lab, I can pull a list of upcoming jobs, know what scheduled start dates they have, and use that to say, okay, well, this is the priority. This is the job I need to program today. And then after that, I can move on to the next one based off of what I see, off of what's happening on the machine schedules. So again, it's going to give your employees more insight into what they have to do rather than kind of milling around and asking a bunch of people, hey, what do you need from me? They can automate that process and make it much more efficient.
And one thing I know for sure after talking to thousands of shop employees is the vast majority of them really want to come in, know what they need to do, work on it, do a great job, make their employers pleased, contribute to their team, and check some boxes off that they completed that, right? And so if you have a nice work queue when people come in the morning, this is exactly the order in which you need to do things when they need to be done. People love that, and it just contributes to a better work environment, more job satisfaction, and longer employment at your shop. So that's something we'll get into later with the third pillar of employees, but even a detail like this really contributes to that part of the business going well. All right. Rework, repackaging, things that you did one way and you realize you have to redo it. This picture was shared yesterday from one of our customers, Marzilli Machine Works, where they wrote a blog and were sharing how they create shipping SOPs, right? Standard operating procedures. And there is their shipping person with a tablet with ProShop showing the actual photos of how they package these parts. It is absolutely fantastic. The fact that this came up yesterday as a link on LinkedIn, I'm like, we just got to grab that picture. So I asked Jamie if I could, and he said yes. So here it is, and it's just such a great example of an easy way, right? Just take a tablet, use the built-in camera, take some photos, of how something is supposed to be done, and a couple little notes, and then anyone can do it, right? If this lady is out sick or on vacation, the next person can just pull that up, see exactly what's supposed to be done. It's very visual. Humans are visual creatures, and they can then do what they need to do rather than trying to guess and make the best decision they can with a lack of good information.
Yeah, and
So,
and a point here is the word easy, right? A little bit of a mantra is, if you make your systems easy to use, people are likely to do it correctly. They're likely to do the right thing. If it's hard, they're likely to do it wrong or not at all.
Mhm.
So the more things that you can make systemic and make easy to do, the better benefits that you're going to get out of it. Easy to use systems can result in great SOPs across the board, not just here in shipping. I think this is a great example of it. And of course, as Paul mentioned, with ProShop, you grab a tablet, you snap a couple pictures, and it does all the file management for you. So you don't have to train your employees on where to store files and how to pull them off of a camera or move them around and relink them. It's easy to do. And so our clients get really, really great results like this example here.
And one other little point about that I will make, Brian, because ProShop does the file management for things like pictures and drawings and all that, and we'll get to this in the fourth pillar, when it comes to compliance, like for example, if these were defense parts and could be considered CUI because taking a picture of it, or things that have specs included in it, when you take this picture, if you're using ProShop Safe, you can classify those pictures as CUI, which feeds right into our classifications module and the ability to lock out certain employees or just have tagging and reporting of where your CUI is and who has access to it. It's a
Yeah.
small thing that ProShop does, but it's massive to as the impact to a shop that needs to have a system in place to track that in order to get their CMMC compliance. So, these are the types of things that we've been thinking about for a long time, and are now starting to become really significant as CMMC just has become law in the last month. So
And the pictures are not on the devices. That's another key point for
that's
that
true.
stuff, right?
That's true.
So, yeah.
Very good. All right. Let's talk about paper for a minute. Everyone knows, let's see, it's very straightforward. Okay. We have a question we'll get to in the Q&A. Project visibility. Even just knowing where your jobs are at, the status of them, trying to get answers to customers, trying to have status meetings, right? It is so much harder when things are on paper, right? There's just a myriad of ways, whether you actually lose a job traveler entirely. I was at a customer in Denver earlier this year, and they shared a story where in their old system that was paper-based, they had a job going through the shop and they completely lost the traveler, right? It was gone. And they had to spend hours and hours recreating. Thankfully, they didn't have to remake the parts, but they spent hours recreating all the work orders, putting re-inspecting them. And, because of course they had the inspection results all in there, all the sign-offs and everything, the material certs. And what do you know, months later, they found that traveler sitting up high on a shelf in the bathroom. So it's just one example of, just the waste that paper creates. This picture was actually taken from a shop out on the East Coast that I visited years ago. This was their traveler setup before ProShop, right? You can see these important pieces of orange paper, use gloves, no fingerprints, multiple times. And this is a valuable set of documents. If this goes missing, or if it gets coolant, you can already see stains on much of this, right? Or someone writes something in pen that you can't make sense of. That can cause a lot of issues. So, getting rid of the paper is such an important thing. We just can't stress that enough. And then when it comes to things like creating document packages, at the very end of the process, we've had clients tell us that our little magic, print the documents button saves them 96% of the time it used to take them doing it their old way, right? Now that's maybe a little bit of an extreme of doing, complex assemblies and having to have hundreds of sheets of certs and first articles and C's of C. But even with simple, single component projects, what used to take 5 or 10 minutes now takes 30 seconds or less. So it can be a major driver of throughput, which again is a bottleneck that you just don't need to deal with, and the cost you don't need to incur on an ongoing basis. Any additional thoughts on that, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, this is where, again, going back to that idea of if you know from the beginning what you need, make sure it's clear and apparent. Because if you know you need a COC, or actually, let's use material certs. If you know you need a material cert, make sure that when you're receiving that item, that you have that material cert, not when you're preparing the data package. Because that at that point, if you don't have it when you received it, you got to go way, way back, all the way back to purchasing and try to find that. So there is an opportunity there again to know that information at the beginning and disseminate it out so you can perform better in overall and not have all of those efficiency leaks that we talked about earlier.
Yep. Yep. Very good. All right. Next bullet point here is just the result. When you can put all these things in place, the net result is eliminating non-value added activities, right? It allows you to just go from, the last job finishing off the machine to the shortest period possible, having the new job running, making chips and into production. Even if you're just a prototype shop versus a production shop, this is still a super relevant point, right? There's usually so much time between jobs that is just waste. And if you can do all these little things that all contribute to reducing the amount of time, keeping those spindles turning, you're going to be making more chips, which means more money. All right. I always smile at that because I think about the Making Chips podcast slogan. If you're not making chips, you're not making money. So,
Yeah.
but nonetheless. All right. Pillar number 3, talent, culture, and knowledge retention. This is just such an important topic. I was at the NTMA Engage conference a few months ago, and they do a survey of all their members, a couple thousand shops or so. And every year, the numbers 2 through 10 vary, whether it's tariffs, whether it's material, whether it's who knows what, not enough sales, the economy. Number 1 for the last 10 years is employees, right? All of you know this super well. You cannot find enough good, skilled people, retain them long term, and just have them be, have that be a really solid part of your business. So, and of course, right now it's particularly acute because of this silver tsunami, right? All the baby boomers, many of the machinists out there are, late 50s, 60s, and they are, at the cusp of retirement. So, it's trying to get all their knowledge and document it into a system that means other people can access it and leverage it and use it is just super important. So let's talk about a few key pillars here, right? Documenting all the things in a business that need to be understood for it to run smoothly, right? There are so many ways and parts of a business that need these kind of systems, like what we see here, which has all the quality and flow down requirements for a customer at the highest level, right? That's one area where very possibly someone in your office manager, your owner, your general manager might know some of these things, but it's not actually documented in a way that everyone else can access it. It's, of course, particularly critical on machines out on the shop floor. Brian talked about this earlier, right? If you have, only Jimmy knows how to set up this one machine because he knows where the fixture is and he knows which G code it is and he knows, how to set all the tools because it's an odd setup compared to what you usually do. That is a risk, right? And that creates bottlenecks, that creates spindle downtime when Jimmy's on vacation or sick or went to the doctor. So documenting all of this is just really, really important, let alone when Jimmy retires. So, and as Brian said before, if you make it easy to do, people will do it right. If you don't, people won't. Brian, this one point here this bullet number 3, advanced aero. So I was at our educational event that we did last year, and last week. And Advanced Aero is a customer, I don't know, 5, 6 years maybe. But we have this feature called process development for those that aren't familiar with it. And it's a way for you to document something that is either like a tribal knowledge type of thing or a process improvement suggestion that you want to make to, improve that part number, that job, that setup, or even for estimating and sales to feed into the system of things that the shop really needs to know about this job that they just quoted. And they knew
Yeah.
they'd been having good traction on doing process development, but they ran a report just right during a staff meeting, and they realized that they did over 800 items in the last year, with 88% of them being resolved all the way through to completion. So It's just such an incredibly powerful tool and mechanism for driving continuous improvement and documenting tribal knowledge.
Yeah, I think this kind of, when you told me this, it struck me as a really cool KPI. It's something I hadn't really ever considered before, but as something that you can track as a performance indicator, that is great, right? You know, not only are you documenting these challenges and these issues, but you're also solving them. And that means that they're never going to have to solve those problems again. They don't need to lean on the original person, whether that person left the company, retired, or whatever, or maybe they're just working on another project. Those problems are solved and they're documented and it's all there. It's easy to find, right? ProShop will even with our process development pages. When you log into a repetitive order, it will automatically tell you that there's process development information. So you don't even have to worry about people trying to dig for it. Again, if it's easy to do, people are likely to do it correctly.
Yep. Very good. Yeah. And again, it comes back to make it easy for people and they'll use it. Make it hard and they won't. So, all right. So we've talked about documenting knowledge, getting it in a system that's accessible. Let's talk for a few minutes about actual culture. As I do the Machine Shop Mastery and now the Making Chips, podcasts, one of the biggest themes that I have seen that guests talk about is the importance of their culture, right? And maybe they learned what not to do from previous companies they used to work for, or the previous leadership of their companies. But having a good, strong, supportive, safe, accepting culture is one of the most important things that you can do. Obviously, hiring, it's hard to find people with skills these days. And, the shops having the most success in this area are hiring for culture and aptitude. And they're training for the skills, right? They're building their own apprenticeship programs. I know I keep calling out Kyra. She has an apprenticeship program at her shop. You'll learn about it if you listen to her podcast episodes. But it is such a critical aspect here. And providing tools and resources to make sure those employees feel seen and heard and supported and encouraged in their growth is a crucial part of having this culture. This is a screenshot of a tool that we built probably 20 years ago in ProShop. It's the employee survey system. It's not particularly fancy these days, but it is still a really fundamentally important tool where you can, occasionally run an employee survey. It's truly completely anonymous. We have a funny story of one of our employees way back in the day, who actually still works here at ProShop, who did not believe that it was anonymous, despite us telling him so. And so even though he loved the company, he gave us like ones and zeros across every category. And Kelsey was just beside himself with concern that there was someone in our midst that was so unhappy. And then finally, this guy said, "Hey, why didn't you come talk to me about my survey results?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I'm the one that gave all the zeros." He's like, "It was you?" He's like, "Are you really that unhappy?" He's like, "No, I love it, but I just wanted to make sure that it's truly anonymous." And it truly is.
Yeah.
And Brian knows exactly who that is. But just even showing that, that you care enough to ask your employees what they think about the company, is a great indicator that you actually do care.
Yeah. And it's different than working with these folks every day, right? Even if you're a small shop and you're a dozen people or whatever, you're working with these people every day. You probably have a really, really good relationship and a good rapport. But being intentional about asking these questions it hits wholly differently, right? It's a totally different impact. And it gives people pause and a moment to sort of reflect in a way that they might not do sort of in the moment and on those daily interactions. So it can be really, really impactful to understand, what's going on and really listen to what those employees have to say, because you're likely to learn something and be able to utilize that and push that forward into new incentives for the company and maybe new direction. And this is where I want to pull back on that social media topic that you talked about at the beginning, where you can use social media as part of that sales process. It's very likely that if you're a small business owner and you've been doing this for 20 years, social media isn't your thing, right? It's not my thing. I'm not great at it. But if you have staff that might be in that culture, maybe because they're younger or maybe because that's really important to them on the sideline, that could potentially be an avenue, right? So again, understanding that kind of information through things like intentional surveys and intentional meetings about this kind of stuff can really end up leading you to more advantageous functions with your employees and give them avenues to grow. Your business can benefit, and it's just sort of better all around.
Yep, you get it, Brian. Appreciate you sharing all that. All right, let's move on. We gotta quicken our pace at the end here. So we firmly believe that modern systems and a great culture are one of the most essential things to attracting and retaining young employees and new tech-savvy employees. And we had this great quote just from that event last week, actually. Jeff, one of the customers that came, he said ProShop has been a significant recruiting tool for them. He says that when he shows ProShop to a potential machinist and says like this is how you're gonna know how to do your jobs, he's like they take the job almost every time, right? And contrasting, that reality to a shop where everything's in paper, there's chaos all over the place, um, and it's up to the employee to really kind of figure it out on their own, or have to be really nervous and stepping through all these uncertain steps just contributes to a better work environment, and more likely that employee is going to choose you because they have choices, right? We know this. It's so hard to find them these days. All right, let's talk the last pillar: technology, data, and compliance. Right, this is just an important fundamental part about building a foundation, getting your business ready for the future, and having a strong foundation for growth. Right. These days, compliance means way more than just AS 9100 or ISO 9001, right? It means CMMC and ITAR and all these things, particularly if you serve the defense industry. And it is my belief that the CMMC, the concepts behind CMMC, whether it's exactly CMMC or not, is going to flow down to other industries, right? No industry, whether it's commercial aerospace, uh, whether it's, well, obviously the nuclear industry, but even like oil and gas or semiconductors, like those companies do not want their data to be hacked and released by vendors that have weak practices. So I think we're going to increasingly see cybersecurity be an important factor for getting into the vendor base of these high, sort of higher class companies. And so it's just more important than ever. We've done a ton of work over the last several years to build features that are actually able to help check off the actual, 110 controls of the NIST standard that make up the requirements of CMMC. So having systems to, again, like I mentioned earlier, to classify your documents and your records, making sure the flow downs from your customers are being flowed down to your vendors, and all the other myriad little ways that compliance shows up in our shops is just so important. And of course, related to QMS specifically, right? ProShop is just as much a QMS as it is an ERP, right? It's fully integrated into the way everything works. And I can't imagine running a shop a different way where you have standalone systems for quality and shop floor and all these things. Having it all be one just makes everything so much better. And it allows you to ship more parts and, make more profit. So it's an important one there. And then, I talked early on about, right, this conception that I'm just too busy. I got too much going on. The fear of change is too great. And I'm just going to stick with the status quo. That can be comforting at some level, but I hope that those of you out there that, realize that betting on sticking with your old ways is going to be a great long-term strategy. Realize that it's just not, right? You have to get past your comfort zone. You have to, take a leap, and sometimes just focus on, improving what you're doing. And sometimes that means whole new software systems. In fact, I just noticed Jim on the call here. Jim has been attending ProShop webinars for 6 or 7 or 8 years even, and just became a customer just a few weeks ago. So thank you so much for that trust, Jim. All right. And Brian, you wanted to make a good point.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us your point here.
Yeah, so this is the idea that we're too busy, we're too slow right now, those kinds of things. You can't you can build a shed on pier blocks, right? And it's going to do great. It's going to serve its purpose. But if you're building a skyscraper, you really have to consider that foundation much differently. So understanding what your business needs, you really can't use the excuse of I'm too busy or I'm too slow. If you want your business to be successful and you want it to be built on a solid foundation, you really need to pay attention to that. And it doesn't matter what size it is. Of course, you build the foundation according to what size you need. But most companies, the vast majority of people we talk with, are going to build something that they can improve and build up over time. So that stuff needs to be considered. And don't just try to do it on pure blocks. Let's get a proper foundation in place.
Because I know the people on this call want to build a skyscraper, not a shed. So,
Right, right.
and of
And
course,
that
we believe that choosing the right partner is just incredibly important, right? This industry, there's lots of options out there. There's some good companies. There's some companies that maybe aren't as invested in the industry, in your success, in sharing best practices the way that we do, regardless of where you're running your business. And yeah, we would love to be that partner for you guys. So, Brian, we have finished the four pillars. Hopefully, we shared some good stuff today. I know you had some awesome points, and we do have a bit of Q&A here. So, the first one, and I'll just throw this up while we're answering those. Pictures in ProShop. Where can I learn on how to do this? Most of my guys won't do it unless it's really straightforward. Right to your
Yep,
point, Brian.
yep.
And I know you know this super well. Why don't you just go ahead and give an answer to this one here?
Yeah, so really, if you're using ProShop and you grab a mobile device, any of those buttons that say Add Image or Add Picture, if you access that button through a mobile device, it will literally ask you. It depends on the device, Android versus iPad or whatever. It will ask you if you want to use the camera, and then if you just follow that path, you can snap a picture, and when you hit save, it will upload it and do all of that work for you. If you've got any problems with that, any challenges, you can ask Ali, the chat assistant built right inside of ProShop, and it'll tell you how to do it. And of course, if you still have some issues and something isn't working right, you can also ask Ali to just chat with somebody on our team, and they can help you out with that. No problem at all.
Yep. So hopefully that answers the question. And again, if because ProShop manages, those files, it will put it like if you take a picture of a part setup, for example, maybe operation 50, which is your first machining operation, ProShop will not only take that file and stick it into a folder for that part number, which is nested under the folder for the customer, but it will also give it a description that it is a work instruction for operation 50. So when someone then needs to go browse that file structure to maybe look for stuff or organize things, it's all right there. It has the appropriate name. You can see it was the first photo that was taken, right? And it's a human browsable data structure instead of just being like embedded in the database. And that's important as well because when you want to interact with that photo or that file in the future, you can do so directly in the cloud environment as opposed to having to download it to your local computer, which again feeds into CMMC compliance. So
Right.
next question here, and I think this is our last one before we have to wrap up here. Have you ever considered having a trigger about process dev when you open a part rather than a work order? Yes, we certainly have, Kyra, and I think even more to that point, there's been an idea floating around lately that on a part level or a work order, if there is process dev that is not resolved and fully sort of closed loop, that there will be a little icon, a number right next to process dev showing, one, two, or three, or whatever it is of the number of outstanding items that are still, unresolved. So it is definitely something that we have taken note of and plan to make it better next year. So thanks for the suggestion. All right, everybody. Well, that takes us right to the top of the hour. Thank you so much for this time today. Hopefully that was useful. Brian, thank you for all your great wisdom and insights. And yeah, if this will be the last thing that we do publicly before the end of the year. So wishing all of you an incredibly warm and welcome holiday time with your family and get some good rest in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Cheers. See you next year.